So I'm Leslie, and I have a neuromuscular disease called myotonic dystrophy. And I was diagnosed over 21 years ago. And I would say this sort of situation has happened many times, that I have had many people, including friends who I've talked about my condition with, remember it, lock it away in their head as MS. And they would send me information or tell me in person information about MS, the latest research, or, oh, I heard about a treatment for you, Leslie. And they'd go, they'd talk about it. I go, really? I haven't heard anything about that. She goes, well, it's for MS. I go, oh, that's good, but I don't have MS. My condition is nothing like MS. Anyhow, so that's very common and still occasionally happens. But in terms of practitioners, I would say this one neurologist I went to see for a while, he's no longer practicing. He was very well respected. He was the head of a clinic, a neuromuscular disease clinic, and I hadn't talked to him, and this is like 15 years ago. And I was suffering from a lot of fatigue, and I was talking to him about it as energy, like feeling like my life force had been sucked out of me. And he looked at me and looked in my eyes, and it was like he had nothing to pin that on. And I talked about muscle pain, and all he could tell me was I should get into therapy for cognitive behavioral therapy. That was his advice. And this was a neurologist. So a lesser degree, and this is only about 6-7 years ago, I saw an herbalist who I had met in a class. She was giving a class somewhere. It was interesting, and she talked about doing private practice. And I'm open to a lot of different things. I'd had a really great experience with acupuncture, and I've been practicing yoga, which has really helped me a lot. And I had never seen a quote-unquote herbalist. So I went to her house. She doesn't have an office. She works out of her home. And she didn't tell me really, I wasn't familiar with where she lived. And I got there, and it was facing the highway right by the Greyhound bus station, and she had a high wire fence that you had to buzz to get to her house. So it was not a safe area, and I was there at dusk. And so, it was a little scary. I'm not from the hood, it was a little uncomfortable. And once I got in, her house smelled like marijuana, which, I'm not opposed to marijuana, but I don't often go into homes reminding me of college, where, I think I paid her $150 for the session, and I had to use the bathroom at one point, and I went in her bathroom, and there was a joint on a roach clip on the sink. And I think the session with her was just very bizarre, and she kept telling me how dry I was, and she gave me a big bag of herbs and never really explained how they were going to help me. I guess it was for my dryness. That was really disconcerting, and I felt kind of ripped off, and I, of course, never went to see her again. But the most dramatic, and this wasn't necessarily a personal one-on-one situation, but it was when I facilitated support groups regularly. They were at a hospital, in a classroom in a hospital, and I would have different speakers, guest speakers come. And this one, it's a school in San Francisco that is headed by a man who, he may or may not have a PhD, but the whole school is about healing. And he had written a book and he claimed to have cured himself of blindness. That's his claim to fame. And he came to the support group, you know, as a guest to talk about his healing experience. And it turned out that his modality was massage. And he also claimed that he could cure people of muscular dystrophy through an intense massage regimen. And you would move to where his school was for about a month, and every day you would be involved in this massage, and he would cure you of your muscular dystrophy. And I mean, there were, you know, this was a group I facilitated of all different kinds of people, you know, all adults, all different kinds of neuromuscular diseases, and people of different education, SES, you know, just different walks of life. Probably people that watch Fox News. And there were several people that were they were captivated. And they were having discussions, this one husband and wife, talking about how they could get the money together so he could participate in the program. And it was just heartbreaking. And, you know, I had heard of snake oil, those kind of, you know, people. I mean, I just had never met anyone like that. And I mean, it was a dramatic experience because I realized I have to definitely vet anyone, whoever comes to this support group again. So that experience, even though it wasn't one-on-one, it has always been in the back of my mind that there are people out there who are going to try to take advantage of, you know, people's vulnerabilities.
Sure. I'm Melissa TALWAR. I represent the fibromyalgia community. I've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia since the age of 14, and I also have autoimmune something. I'm the executive director for Support Fibro, and I'm also a functional medicine health coach. Coming into this, I just wanted to really be a better advocate than I didn't have anyone like that growing up as I went through this. And of course, I've tried a ton of different products, been sold a lot. And I know in my teens, so this is in the 90s when we didn't have all this social media to share opinions on what products work and all of that. I was just desperate. I was desperate to relieve my pain. I was desperate to get some good quality sleep. So anything in that realm, I was looking out for. I've had doctors tell me it was all in your head, from neurologists and specialists. I think, you know, I did stuff like boiling cabbage to drink the boiled water with the cabbage for good sleep. I've tried everything, of like different bed setups. We've spent so much money. But I remember the more vivid memory of being sold this product, and I couldn't remember why we went for it. And this is why I just advise people, like, it's okay to question what the doctors tell you, and do your research. Was these leg splints, I guess it was some NASA grade plastic material mold that they made when I was 15. And they fitted the leg splints. And so this is how he told me I needed to walk around. And I cannot for the life of me remember why, the reasoning behind this. I just remember it cost a lot out of pocket because insurance, of course, didn't cover it. And I just would I would go to school, I would play sports in them, physical therapy. It was bad because Forrest Gump was very popular at this time. So this became my new nickname because it was very, like, even though it was this NASA grade plastic, I looked like Forrest Gump from the movie with those splints. So, I mean, I definitely tried everything. It's frustrating to get all this information and people say and swear by it. So I'm just glad that we have more avenues of research right now, and we're sharing with each other as a community. So that's what I really try to do, and be a better advocate to others. And I do encourage people to always research before they dive in, because I know that we really just want to feel better and have some science behind it, or look into things a little bit more. So that's my journey.
Thanks. I'll ask you questions after. So Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in June 2014, and I'm actually doing very well. Let's see, I haven't had problems with going off on wild goose chases after snake oil things because I had quite a bit of experience with Chinese medicine for many years before that, which who knows, maybe it helped me have a rather, very slow progressing case. I don't know. A lot of these things you don't know. You just kind of, go with your gut on some of these things because we don't have clinical trials, et cetera. But and also I'm the daughter of a orphaned mother from the Depression who is very cheap. So I won't spend a lot of money. I'm very aware of the money I'm spending on this stuff, and I have a limit. And I won't go from one thing to the other. For example, I have some interest right now in something called Mucuna that actually many people are using as to either substitute or complement Sinemet, which is the gold standard of Parkinson's medication. It helps a lot with the symptoms if you're lucky, but that's all it does. It masks symptoms. But Mucuna is sort of a more Ayurvedic form of that. So I am interested in it, but I've run into a couple of situations with that. One is just that a good friend of mine in the community has been working with an Ayurvedic doctor for a long time, and she said, well, the Mucuna is part of this whole Ayurvedic thing. And I probably, when all this coronavirus deal is over, I will spend the money to make an appointment to see this person. But there's no way I'm going to jump into an Ayurvedic regimen, no matter how great it is, because I have been working with Chinese medicine and acupuncture and herbs for such a long time. I don't want to mix them, or I just don't want to do it. So I have a fair amount of common sense, which has saved me from a lot. I did have a funny, not as I used to say to my students, not ha 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 funny, but I had a funny sort of negative experience involving trying to find Mucuna from somebody else. And somebody that I know in the community, this woman could be perfectly nice, but I had a bad experience with her. He said his wife, who was a naturopath, and he's on Mucuna and so forth. So he said, you can call her. Well, I called her, and she, was going on and on about, well, first of all, she was really weird, and she did call back to apologize about her behavior, but I thought, you don't get a second chance, sorry. I'd say things like, well, I feel pretty good. And she'd go, no, you don't. You do not feel good. And then, maybe this is TMI, but she said, because constipation is an issue in bowels. She goes, well, maybe, how's the constipation of the bowels? I said, oh, I'm never constipated. And she goes, yes, you are. You are constipated. And I was like, okay. And then she went off on how I absolutely have to stop all Sinemet, which is the the gold standard, that I use. And most people, even if they're dabbling in Mucuna, still stay on the Sinemet to one extent or another. And she was saying, no, you have to follow this one guy, some dude, I don't know, he was a snake oil guy, I guess. And, no Sinemet whatsoever. So then, just because I'm sort of deer in the headlights, I made an appointment with her for $500, which I canceled like 2 days later. And she apologized on the phone, and I said, yeah, later, honey, But, I looked up the guy, the magic man on the internet, and there are some red flags. First of all, if nobody in the Parkinson's community has heard of him, he's not curing any Parkinson's. Second, second of all, if he's saying he can cure everything from baldness to Parkinson's to whatever, that's a red flag. And also, when I was in Kyoto at the World Parkinson's Conference in last June, one of the really interesting presentations that I saw, because there are a lot of, it's both people who, patients, caregivers, and people in the medical community. So it's a very interesting kind of conference to interact with people. So I went to something called medical tourism, and medical tourism, sorry, I'm pronouncing that with my Utah accent, tourism. Medical tourism is, people who go off on these wild goose chases. It doesn't have to be Mexico, but it can be in, down the street in Pacifica, for example.
Right.
And so an interesting sidebar on that is, you might have heard about stem cells having a lot of promise for Parkinson's, and there is a lot of promise, but the FDA does not control people who are doing things like stem cells. You can walk in, mom and pop store down the street can set up a stem cell thing, and you can go walk in there and get your stem cells done, but it's not necessarily going to be very beneficial to you.
Wow.
So that's one thing, that you can have those procedures are not regulated. So be careful.
Yeah.
And also he had a lot of, qualities that these red flag snake oil people have. One is they're going to be on a website and they're definitely going to be wearing a white coat and possibly have a stethoscope. There's going to be a long sort of resume of crap that makes them sound really like they know what they're doing. And they will be throwing around medical terms, complicated medical terms, which if you look up, do not exist. So there's red flags, and also, the thing if they say they're going to cure everything, and there's a whole list of things to look for, like just do not go there, So I'm fairly savvy about all of those things.
Nancy and Melissa shared a little that, though I think they tended to be a little more positive than I was.
Oh, I can be negative.
It's hard. I think I've just trained myself not to, but I have a ton more rants that I'm like going through my head right now.
Do a rant. Come on, we have some time. Give a rant. Come on, Melissa.
Go for it.
Well, you trigger also with my thought, because I did go as a teen, so I was getting massive headaches at that point in time. And there was an oral or surgeon in dentistry. And I was just complaining because he said, you had some misalignment. So what his thought, I asked him, like with the surgery, because I wanted to take apart my jaw and that would help fix my headaches. And I said, would this 100% help my headaches? He's like, well, no, but he's like, at least I can help you look better. So when you go in for a job interview, you're not turned down because your face is crooked. So
Oh, God.
I was 16 years old, so that didn't help.
Oh. That's
You
a
want me
good
to do a
one.
rant? I could rant for hours, but I don't have to.
So, Laurel.
Okay. Well, I can talk a little bit about mine. So I was diagnosed, as I said, when I was 50 with bipolar disorder 1. And a lot of different disorders, like the ones you're talking about, can take a lot of time to get diagnosed. There's a lot of different symptoms. And I understand that you've had to see a lot of different doctors, right, Leslie?
Mm-hmm.
And something that's a little bit different about a disorder of the brain is that the mind is not necessarily cooperating in the search. At the beginning of their diagnosis, most people with bipolar disorder do not believe that they're sick. If they are manic, part of the nature of mania is that something comes into play called anosognosia. And it means that you are not capable, it is not possible for you to perceive that you are ill. And Oliver Sacks talked about this anosognosia a lot. The first place I read about it was in The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, where people with gross physical abnormalities or disabilities don't perceive that they have them, such as that they are missing a limb, something you would think would be very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But in a similar manner, people that have certain severe mental illnesses, such as schizophrenia or such as bipolar disorder in the manic stage or a psychotic stage, will be completely unaware that there is anything wrong with them. They may think that if they're having a good time, such as the euphoric part of mania, which I experienced, you may think, what is everybody just trying to spoil my fun? There's nothing wrong with me.
Mm.
Even though your behavior is so totally abnormal and off the charts that everybody can see that there's something severely wrong with you. But in that instance of euphoric mania, you're just having a good time. So you're not on the team necessarily and trying to find out what's wrong with you at the beginning. You just think nothing is wrong with you. And so that interferes with the diagnostic situation a great deal, in that the patient is not on board with the team. And then at a certain point in my first undiagnosed manic episode, when I realized, okay, well, something is really wrong with me. What could it be? And I tried to help with this. Nobody else could figure it out for quite a while, which was very, very difficult in my getting a diagnosis. I went through at least 8 months of a severely manic episode where I increasingly lost touch with reality, with the nature of reality, could not perceive what was happening with me. And unfortunately, I had a doctor who couldn't figure it out either. And he was my psychiatrist that I had been seeing for months and months, years actually. And I had been originally misdiagnosed with depression. Yes, so I had been diagnosed with depression, which is very, very common error. Okay, so it's very, very common for psychiatrists to misdiagnose mania as depression, because generally patients present to the doctors in a depressed state, because that's when they are sure that there's something wrong and they go to a doctor for help. Whereas if they're having a manic episode, most commonly people do have euphoric manic episodes, although some people have dysphoric, very unpleasant ones. They don't tend to go into the doctor, because you don't go into a doctor and say, I'm feeling really great, so I just wanted to share with you. It doesn't work out that way. But I was having a lot of trouble functioning, more and more trouble functioning. And so I had work problems to deal with, and I had to see the psychiatrist. And so I would say, well, don't you think, and what do you think about this behavior? And I would be very talkative, because mania, it has a lot of different, very weird, symptoms, I guess you could call it. And one is talking nonstop for a very, very long time, going from one tangent to another, which is not that different from the way I normally talk anyway, but it's to a great, great extreme. But so a doctor should notice something like that you can't stop talking ever. And then there's some things that you may not necessarily share with your doctor, some symptoms like hypersexuality, which is you feel like having sex constantly. You think about sex all the time, and you feel like having sex with anybody and everybody. That wasn't something it occurred to me to bring up to my psychiatrist, although later he asked me why I didn't. And it just never occurred to me that was an issue for a psychiatrist. It seemed like, I thought maybe it was had to do with menopause. Although other people that had gone through menopause already that I asked my friend Laura, did you feel like having sex all of the time? And she just laughed so hard that I knew that wasn't it.
Yeah. Kind of the opposite.
Kind of the opposite, yes. So if anything, I would have asked my OBGYN or somebody else, not the psychiatrist. You
So
feel like
can I
making
ask you a
jokes?
question?
Oh, yeah. Yes, please.
So once you were diagnosed and you started, getting on different medications and,
okay.
getting your condition under control, have you had experiences where friends offered ridiculous advice?
Yes.
Because everyone is an expert.
Oh yeah, I was going to go on to that, but I just thought I should maybe give a little bit more background. So my disease, and as all of you are talking about, is very little understood. So people will come up with advice that's like not just unhelpful, but sometimes it seems like they have no idea what's wrong with you, and they're giving you advice for something else. But one part that makes a little bit more sense is that people will talk to somebody with bipolar disorder 1 or 2, 1 is more severe, as if you just have depression. And one pole of it is depression, and you can be very, very depressed, so depressed that you can't get out of bed, which is something that a lot of people have trouble understanding. It's like, well, why can't you? Because it seems like it's a matter of the will, but it's really not that simple. You become incapable of changing your mindset because, yes, it is all in your mind and you can't control your mind. So people make suggestions like, well, just get up and go for a walk, which, okay, if I could get out of bed and maybe if I could get into my clothes, but they don't understand that every single aspect, when you're feeling that deeply depressed, you can barely move. Mm-hmm. You can barely eat or drink, or you can't do any of your normal functions. Getting up to go to the bathroom is a Herculean task. So saying, well, why don't you just go for a walk, is not helpful at all, because of course you would love to if you could. Another thing is people will say, just think about all of the wonderful things you have in your life. And I have lots of wonderful things in my life, and I'm very conscious of them. I have a husband and daughter who love me, and wonderful friends, and I have a lot of things to be grateful for. But those things are completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Yeah. And people have a lot of understanding of that too, in terms of how anyone could want to leave their family because there's so much pain involved with this disorder. It's like physical pain. It's kind of worse than physical pain in a way. And I think about being in labor and for 3 days and how painful that was. And it's much worse. It's much, much worse. So I never understood people feeling that if they had children or they could leave loved ones behind and decide to exit. But when you're feeling that way, you just think of it as kind of a mercy killing. You wish anybody would do it, but if no one else will do it, you'll have to be the one. And I remember thinking at my very lowest point, well, my family wouldn't want me to keep suffering, would they? Mm-hmm. And so that's how you feel. It's not that you want to leave anybody behind or hurt anybody. It's just that you cannot bear the pain another second. So, okay, well, that's a very grim point of that, but,
you know what? We have a few more minutes because I want to be very conscious and respectful of everybody's time. Because, we have a lot to do, hunkered down.
We do.
Right.
I'm busy.
So I
Maybe
had
let
a
me-
question.
Yes.
I wanted to ask Melissa, because you've been you were diagnosed at a young age, and you've been living this for many years. What kind of weird advice have you gotten from friends, from peers during that process? Because you were young and people might not, I don't know, sometimes when people are younger, they're less thoughtful and considerate. And then, you had the potential to have even weirder suggestions from peers. Do you have anything to share?
A lot of the stuff that kept coming up is the usual, like just get up and exercise. I had family members tell me if you had enough willpower, you'd be able to will your illness away. I did. I mean, I became a black sheep within the family because there was all kinds of stuff. I mean, if you eat this, try that, or just amongst peers, like this really works. I mean, we get it all the time right now on social media because we constantly get the messages of people like pitching us. It's just, and back then it was really tough to discern that. Now that I know better, but it's just, even my parents were desperate to get me help too. So I think we got just in trouble with just constantly that desperation of trying to find answers. But there was a lot of different family stuff. And I mean, again, I tried a lot of things. I have sensitivity to products and herbs. So I've had to really be careful about introducing that, and you learn the hard way. And it wasn't necessarily snake oil from acupuncturist. It was just too much of a combination with set off hives. I've been in the ER multiple times from trying herbal remedies. So
Wow.
I think, I mean, some of it's, family suggestions wasn't, made sense, and we don't want to discount that, but also just off the wall. The willpower thing, like, got to me.
Yeah. I get different comments on my website, for different blog posts, and I would say 70% of it is spam, and the biggest spam are people promoting herbal life, which I don't know what it is, but there are multiple people, or at least they claim to be different people, and they'll try to follow a thread from the blog post, and then they jump into Herbalife saved my husband from MS, Parkinson's, dementia, cancer, and anyhow, it's crazy. Did you all have any questions for each other?
Oh, you know what? I wanted to just mention, I really didn't get to some of the bad advice that people ask. So let me just add some briefly. Okay. Look at your diet. People would say that, and I've been a vegan for many, many years. I'm very conscious about my diet. So no, that was not the answer. Also, exercise. I ran a marathon. I'm very, very active. That was not the issue. But one also that people really misunderstand is if you have been taking meds for a long time, people will say, if you have a new problem, aren't you taking your meds?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, meds are not a cure. They just can take the edge off, and you're still really symptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that sometimes the symptoms are worse than others. But also the willpower. I can also relate to what Melissa's saying, because people very, very often say it's a matter of willpower. You can believe that you'll get better. And especially with a mental illness, it's all in your mind anyway. So you can just totally take control of it and will it away. It does not work that way. So that's it.
How about you, Nancy, and peers that don't, have any kind of chronic illness? Have they offered unusual advice to you?
Well, not, of course I'll always get the thing of, oh, I just saw this on the internet, and I have to just very diplomatically say, if you've seen it on the internet, I've probably already heard, it's well-meaning, but just, I was writing down some of my greatest hits of things that, insensitive comments. Let's see, what are some? Oh, people's first reaction is when you say you have Parkinson's, especially in the beginning, is they want to start talking about people that they know who have Parkinson's or who've died, and they'll go into these long, horror stories. Like that just happened the other day. I was on the phone, and now I have a little bit more sense of humor and a sense of boundaries with it. But a good friend, I was on one of these long coronavirus, telephone calls the other day, and she told me that, a cousin or something of hers had died. And I said, oh, is he the person with Parkinson's? And she said, yes, but she didn't just say yes. It turned into this. And when he died, he had lost the ability to blah, 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 dementia, da, 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 da. And I had to stop her. I said, please, I have this disease. So I don't really want to, it's very common. And then they want to bitch it. They want to tell you these long hypochondria stories about them. So I had this woman who I'm not terribly fond of in my living room at one point. And I think she's prefaced this with, I know you're interested in health. So, and then I had to listen to this long story about every time she'd been to the doctor and which medicine she tried and took and didn't, for God knows what. So I'll get those. And then, everybody likes to play doctor. So they like to make predictions about what's going to happen to you based on what happened to somebody that they know.
Oh.
So I was trying to be like grown up, and this was in a social situation. Everybody there, maybe 4 people there, knew I had Parkinson's. Trying to be all grown up and talking about, it's kind of an interesting disease. It does this, 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 this. And then all of a sudden this woman just blurted out, and then sometimes you go along and you're fine, and then it spikes. And I'm like, spikes? Based on what? And you think of these things that you want to say later, like, what are you basing this spike thing on? So you think of these great comebacks later. And then they like exaggerations too, because I don't know, it makes them sound like more verbal or something. So this was very early on when I was very sensitive. And one of my good friends, I said, if you notice things about my movement, let me know, So I'm driving her to her car and she goes, well, you asked me to tell you about any observations. And what I've noticed is you have almost completely lost movement in your left arm. Well, here, left arm, this does not mean completely lost movement. Hello. And I said, I just said, we're done, with this conversation. I just stopped it, because.
Did you eject her out of the seat? And she.
Yeah, with your left arm. So, and then strangers too, they'll just come up to you and say, and I think, because of course half of this is just my vanity. I want to look good and normal. So most of the time I look pretty normal, but if I'm having an off period, which is sometimes I look more Parkinson-ish, I have that look. And so I've had total strangers. One time a total stranger came up, touched my arm and said, what happened to you? Did you have a stroke? Oh. It's like, how many times do you walk up to somebody you do not know and ask them if they had a fucking stroke? Oh. So I want to say, what happened to you? Did your Tourette's syndrome go really and what?
Did you have a lobotomy?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and on. So that's my rant. I'm really mad at, I know, Robin Williams also suffered from depression, and I, have had, anyway, Parkinson's causes some depression, and he killed himself. He happened to have been diagnosed practically in the same week I was. Mm. And I know he was on a different path, and there was, other things involved, but he killed himself later in that summer. And that was maybe one of the worst weeks of my life. And I've just had this resentment for him that he didn't stick around and do comedy about this, because it would have been so fucking funny to listen to him rant about all the stuff that people, the stupid things that people say and do.
Yeah.
But I have to, so you wanted a rant, you got one. I could go on. I'm going to stop. But you know, all these people I'm talking about are people who most of them really love me and care about me. So I can't just, you know, like scream at everybody that I know, you know, so I have to kind of like, you know, breathe,
you know,
understand their point.
I only invited people that I see as positive and managing their lives in a healthy, productive way. So, you know, I think my goal is just to, for me, it's like, I'm not always positive. You know, I have had these experiences. There are days where I feel pissed off or sad or depressed. But for the most part, I'm positive. And so I appreciate you all digging in maybe to that part of your brain, you know, where you've compartmentalized some of those negative experiences, because you don't live your daily life with those in the forefront. There's just a chance to vent and let people know, yeah, we have all kinds of emotions around our condition, but basically we're all doing okay, and knock on wood, you know, pulling through, and especially during this pandemic, we're trying to rise to the occasion. So I appreciate all of you participating. Any closing comments?
I just want to say one more important thing I left out, which is about medication shaming. But a lot of people in the mental health movement are very anti-medication, and there are always people who do not have serious mental illnesses. And, you know, there's a lot of pressure that you should try to go it without medications. And some people don't need them, but everyone with a serious mental illness does need medication. So,
you know, if there's a medication for a condition, a lot of people with MS are taking medications. Nancy, right? You take meds?
Yeah.
Right.
And I take an antidepressant.
You don't, right?
That's whatever happened to me.
But do people tell you that you should not be taking those medications?
I don't share that I'm taking medications with everybody. I'm careful with who I share that with, because there are, like, for example, I take an antidepressant because the chemistry of my brain changed with Parkinson's, and I knew that I was having anxiety and stuff, that I could meditate till the cows come home and I'd still feel terrible. I knew it. So I just thank the goddess every day that this antidepressant is working for me. There are a lot of people in my circle who disapprove of antidepressants and think you should meditate till the cows come home. I just don't tell them.
I think you just have, though.
Well, I just told you.
I put myself out as a very public mental health advocate, and there are two big branches of advocacy that really clash. So it's not, for me, it's not a question of just who I tell.
Yeah.
It's the work I'm doing.
Yeah.
Melissa, did you want to say anything about pharmaceuticals?
I was just going to say that we should have more conversations about this openly and discuss it and not do the shaming, because it's, you know, some people think I'm anti-med because I don't take meds, and that's not the case at all. I mean, for when it works, it's definitely, and people have had great success, and I'm always excited for people. I just been in the category where everything was a really severe side effect and outweighed things. But I mean, if people, like, for example, Ambien gets prescribed, people can sleep better, awesome. Like, I was sleepwalking off of it. So that's where it's just like, you know, I think it, and the list of medications I was on from an early age would never be prescribed to this day, even for an adult. So I think that's where it's like having conversations about it and understanding if it works. And as you start to climb up the ladder to like 20 different medications, like what is going on there and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. In my patient community, there are people who take certain drugs for certain symptoms, and the symptoms are mild enough for me that I wouldn't choose to take that drug because I believe the risks far outweigh the benefits. But there's no treatment for my condition, just some of the different symptoms. And you know, there are some people that take multiple drugs to manage all their systems, but thankfully up until this point, I manage my symptoms through a combination of, you know, diet, exercise, attitude, all that stuff. But if something comes out where it's a real treatment for my specific condition, I would probably, you know, start to weigh the benefits.